Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Before we begin, I'd like to thank my Tier 4 patrons, Russ of the Frozen North and Newsack. Also, please take a moment to hit those like and subscribe buttons and pretend to leave a comment down below. It all helps the algorithm. And if you're feeling especially adventurous, go check us out over on Patreon. There's cool stuff going on over there. Okay, now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, a.k.a. Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 22, Warhorse, Part 1, The First Year, Part 1. Date point, 4 years, 10 months AV. Dominion Embassy Station, Earth Luna L1 Point, Sol System. Dr. Anis Hussein. Shaking hands with a Quartai was an exercise in delicacy. Dr. Hussein thought of himself as an old, increasingly frail man, but he still had the grip strength to cause serious harm to the alien's hand if he applied a little too much vigor. So it wasn't so much a handshake as a hand touch. Still, it was a civil, civilized gesture, and that alone was a mark of just how much his relationship with the Directorate's ambassador, Medra, and through them both, Earth's relationship with the Quartai Directorate, had evolved in a relatively short space of time. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, gratefully taking his seat when the Quartai gestured towards it with those long, fine-boned fingers that he could so easily have pulverized. Medra affected a small, business-like smile. "Thank you for asking nicely," he retorted. "The Gowans continue to think that they can just barge into my office whenever they please." "The Gowans don't want something from you," Hussein replied. He had quickly learned that the Quartai truly loved the direct approach. If you irritated them, they could skate and slide around the issue and deal in lies and half-truths with the best of them. But if you cut straight to the matter at hand and phrased things bluntly, they responded in kind, and pretty soon you either had a deal or an argument. It had been true of Medra's predecessor, and it was true of Medra. After the tangled web of his home country's politics, it was paradise. "Indeed? That sounds like a deviation from your previous position." "There has been a change of strategy," Anis revealed. "Opportunities that we are now considering the possibility of exploiting, to the mutual benefit of any species who partners with us in exploiting them." Medra sat back. "Please don't be vague, Doctor." "All in good time. I would rather tell you what we need. I'm sure you will see our intent soon enough." "Please, do tell me," Medra replied. That was another thing about Quartai psychology. They couldn't resist having both their ego flattered and their intellect challenged at the same time. "Two things. We would like to purchase from you the technology to make a lightweight, load-bearing exoskeleton that does not require a power source to provide assistance to a moving wearer." "Trivial. The other?" "A drug. Cruzier." Medra sat forward. "That is not going to happen," he stated bluntly. "Why not?" "Cruzier has a history of interacting dangerously with human psychology. It has created two of the most notorious and effective criminals the galaxy has ever seen, in fact." "Yes, I've read their files," Anis replied. "I also know enough about Cruzier to be certain that, in their cases, it was applied incautiously and incorrectly. That and the long-term effects are devastating in terms of mental health, which would be detrimental to our plans." Medra stared at him thoughtfully. "You're creating super soldiers," he decided after a few seconds. "An elite unit, certainly," Anis conceded. "Possibly the most elite, but super soldiers may be going too far." "And what conceivable reason would we have for assisting the most dangerous species in the galaxy in creating the most dangerous soldiers they possibly can?" "Ambassador, if we had designs on threatening the Quartai, or anybody else for that matter, then I dare say that we wouldn't need an elite unit. Our regular infantry would easily suffice for any ground warfare conducted against any Dominion species, don't you think? Why would we go to the expense and difficulty of creating a new elite? In which case, I'm intrigued as to the purpose of this hypothetical elite, Major confessed. What do you intend to do with an asset like that? Anise allowed the inner gotcha that rang triumphantly around his head to feed his best warm, closed-lipped smile. Why, Ambassador, he said, to clean up the mess we have made, of course. Date point, 4 years, 10 months, AV. Folk the colony, Cimbrean. The far reaches. Adam Aries. You've got to realize you're asking me about classified information there, kid. I know. Adam had declined the offer to sit down opposite Captain Powell. He preferred to stand instead, resting his hands lightly on the back of the offered chair. I'm not asking you to just tell me. I'm asking you what I have to do to earn it. Powell's own chair creaked as he sat back and folded his arms, scrutinizing Adam, who said nothing, trying not to fidget. Earn it, he repeated. Yes. Right. Powell unfolded his arms and rubbed his thumb on his chin thoughtfully. Why? He asked. The question threw Adam a bit, outraging him. What? What do you mean, why? He demanded. My best friend is dead. So's my mother. So's everyone I went to school with. Millions of people. Right, Powell agreed, nodding amiably. That rather proves that what you're after, if it exists, is a big deal, doesn't it? So, what are you going to do with the information should you acquire it? Is it obsession? Curiosity? Revenge? What? I want to do whatever I can to stop anyone else from dying, Adam snapped. Powell threw him again when his face split into a broad smile. That's so? He asked. That's so. The captain nodded and sat forward. Right then. If it's your goal, then realistically you're looking at military service. And I don't just mean becoming a jarhead or MP. I'm talking intel, special forces, something like that. Not a problem, Adam told him. Aye? Well, we'll see now. Powell rubbed his chin again. Realistically speaking, the only two services that are doing anything in space right now are the Royal Navy and the U.S. Air Force. Thanks to your Cimbrean citizenship, you're eligible to join either service. But frankly, you're more American than Brit, so the latter maybe suits you a bit better. He sat back again. As for what you do in your chosen service, well, that one's your choice to make. I can't advise you there. How did you choose? Adam asked him. Me? The motto, Powell said. Through strength and guile. I liked that. Thought it sounded right fucking badass. He noticed the change in Adam's expression. What? I've never heard you swear before. I don't swear around children, Powell said simply. I'm still only 16. Maybe, but it's not about how old you are, Aries. It's about the choices you make and your reasons for making them. He nodded towards the door. This isn't a decision to be made here in my office, he said. Hit the library, do some research, think about it. My door's open, all right? Adam nodded, still a little stunned by the show of respect. Thank you, Captain. Ava seemed to spend every waking second playing with her inherited camera these days, familiarizing herself with its functions and the different effects she could achieve by varying the shutter speed, aperture size, focus, and more. When she wasn't studying the device itself, she was studying what Sarah had done with it, examining the photos their friend had taken and making notes about their arrangement, composition, and more. She'd co-opted an entire wall of their living room, in fact, covering it in post-it notes and color prints, not to mention having borrowed every single book on photography that Folk's library had. The motto? She asked. I guess. It seems like a goodish thing to go on as anything else, Adam replied. She put the camera down. But special forces, Adam? Won't that take you away for a long time? He stopped searching for a second and turned in his seat. Yeah, it will, he agreed. They hugged, melting into each other's arms without either of them needing to invite the other. What are you going to do you think? He asked after a silent minute or two. She ran a hand through her curls. I guess I want to help people too, she said. I want to make some sense of all this, and now this camera's been left to me, and Sarah's always talked about being a photojournalist. How do you even get started on that? It's not like they have a recruitment. I've been doing my own research here, Eva told him. I thought I'd try for City University London. I guess you'd be away for a long time too then, huh? She nodded, resting her forehead on his. I guess. She caught sight of what was on the screen and looked up. I like that one. He turned and read it aloud. That others may live. Yeah, she said. What do you think? Adam stared at it for a few seconds, repeating it under his breath. I think that's the one, he said.
Pararescue? Powell looked genuinely stunned. Bloody hell, Ares, I can't fault your ambition, but are you sure?
The motto speaks to me, Adam shrugged.
Aye, all right, but not to try and talk you out of it or aught like that. You're setting yourself up for a really fucking difficult couple of years.
I know the training will be hard, but...
No, Powell interrupted him, standing up. You don't. You have no fucking clue what hard really is, I promise you that.
Adam was smart enough to shut up and let him say his piece. The captain dug into his footlocker and pulled out a small A5 notebook, which turned out to be pasted full of photographs and handwritten notes. He flipped through the first few pages until he alighted on a picture of a young, acne-scarred man who was gazing proudly out of the photograph.
This was me when I took the potential Royal Marines recruit course, he said. Right dorky little shite, wasn't I?
Adam caught his eye and realized Powell was amused at himself.
I fucking thought I was a proper Marine, I did. The PRMC is 2.5 days. They test you in the gym and on the assault course, and take you on a 3-mile run. I thought, if this is what it's like, this is gonna be fucking easy.
He laughed silently deep in his chest and flipped the page.
Then I went through the actual Royal Marines training.
The next photo had less acne and a stronger, more Powell-like expression, worn by a young man in a black uniform and a green beret, with a rifle held precisely by his side.
That was tough. The PRMC didn't prepare me for it at all. It just meant I was tough enough to start the training without collapsing.
He closed the book.
Every step along the way, I came up against limits I didn't know I had, and went beyond them. Marines commando training was fucking hell, but I cleared it. Now, to apply for special boat service, you need a minimum of 2 years' service as a Marine commando. Did that. Got some medals too. Figured I was doing well. Then I applied for the SBS, and that finally brought me up against the Joint UKSF selection program.
He opened the book again, flipping to a series of pages filled with pictures of rolling, rugged mountains, many of them falling off to sheer drops.
The first phase of that ends in a test week. 5 back-to-back days of walking 16 or so miles a day in the Welsh mountains with a 50-pound bag and a rifle. And on the last day, 40 miles, which you've got to finish in less than 20 hours.
He sat down.
And it just gets tougher from there. Much tougher. Men have died in that training. I failed the first time. Only barely managed it the second time. But managed it I fucking well did, right?
Adam nodded his understanding. Okay.
From what I've heard, I honestly don't know if I could have made it through the pararescue pipeline,
Powell confessed. His face was the very picture of deadly serious.
They call it Superman School for a bloody good reason.
But people do get through it, Adam pointed out.
Oh, aye, they do. And if you think you'll be one of them, then fucking well go for it. I just want you to have some idea of what you'll be getting yourself in for.
Let's say I do manage it, Adam said. Will that get me in on the secret? Powell said nothing, but returned to his desk and sat down.
Your first step, he said, not answering the question, is recruitment. The nearest U.S. Armed Forces recruiting center is technically in Seattle, because that's the easiest place to get back to from Scotch Creek. If you're going to walk in there and say, I want to be a pararescueman, then it's going to take, a week or so total. You'll need a hotel room.
That long?
You thought it was as easy as just, hi there, I'd like to soldier, please? You'll have to take a...
Powell looked up, remembering a detail.
ASVAB, I think it's called. Vocational aptitude test. They'll put you through a physical and mental evaluation. You'll talk to Special Forces recruiter, the works. He sniffed. If they take you, though I can't see why they wouldn't, you'll go straight on from there to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio for basic training. That's 8 weeks. You'll graduate, see your family for the weekend, and then that's it. You're on the PJ pipeline, and you'll find it a lot harder to see them again after that. Realistically, Christmas, and that's about it. For 2 years, maybe longer.
Adam went quiet and thought long and hard about that one. If that's how I earn it, then that's how I earn it, he said at last.
Decision made, then?
Yes. Powell nodded, then stood and shook Adam's hand.
Well then, I'll be cheering for you, he said.
Could I... Adam trailed off, then shook his head. Never mind.
Spit it out, mate.
If this is going to be hard, could you please help me get started? Give me a taster. Get me in shape. Powell paused.
I'll have to discuss it with Legsy. He's the one who specialized in training and instruction, he said. And he won't like it.
Why not?
Well, because he likes you daft bugger, Powell said. And while he'll be happy to get you up to standard for basic, if he's going to give you a fucking taster of pararescue indoctrination, which is what I think you're asking for, Adam nodded, then he'll have to go hard on you. Right hard.
I guessed as much, Adam said patiently. He was beginning to grow tired of Powell driving the point home. Powell noticed and sighed.
I'll talk to Legs. Meet us in the gym tomorrow at 10:30 after a good breakfast. You'll need it.
Thank you, Captain.
Might be a bit premature there, mate, Powell joked. But you're welcome. I'll do what I can to help you along.
You will?
I'll provide a reference, and believe me, that'll count for a lot. You'd better go on and have a good night's sleep.
I will. Thank you, Captain. Half of Powell's mouth ticked upwards.
Dismissed, he said. Trainee.
Haley Tisdale. The advantage to Cimbrean's small, compact houses was that answering the door never took long, even if it was just yelling, I'll be out in a minute. Haley used that time to fill the kettle and start it boiling, take a quick stock of the house to make sure that it was tidy, and hide a certain little white box before she opened it. Not for the first time, she reflected that with her heart-shaped face and curly dark hair, Ava was the very picture of the painfully pretty girl next door, in jeans and flannel. Today, though, she was also painfully nervous about something, to judge from the way she'd been pacing a little awkward circles around outside, rubbing her fingers together. Ava, what's wrong, honey? Ava gave her a nervy little smile. Nothing's wrong, it's just, I could use some advice. From me? That was astonishing. Haley wasn't sure she was qualified to give advice to anybody on anything these days. Please? Haley stepped aside. Come on in, she offered. Ava did so and perched herself restlessly on the edge of the couch. Cup of tea, sweetie, or I've got Ovaltine. Ava smiled a little weakly. Ovaltine would be nice, she agreed. Haley let her relax as she bustled about, taking a little longer making the drinks than was strictly necessary. By the time she was done, Ava had sat back a little and released some of the tension in a big sigh. So, what's up? Haley asked, though she'd had a sneaking suspicion. Ava puffed out her cheeks and exhaled. Adam and me, we've never... Okay, so Haley's suspicion had been wrong, but now she understood what this was really about. You've not? Oh, honey, I kind of thought with you two living together. Ava looked down at her hands, which were a frantic little knot of fingers. Different beds, she said with a little sigh. Are you okay with me coming to you? Well, who else are you going to ask? Adam's dad? Haley laughed, and Ava giggled. No, honey, I'm actually kind of flattered. What do you need to know? I guess whether I should, really, Ava said, relaxing. I mean, Mom and Dad always said I should wait for marriage, and so did mine. I didn't listen. Yeah, but no, honey. Listen to me for a second. Haley shuffled forward on the couch and set her tea down. I know you miss your parents so much it hurts. I can't go 2 hours without remembering Sarah, and she closed her eyes and rallied. But let me tell you what I'd wish I'd told her, okay? All your parents would want for you is to be happy and to be safe. That's all. It is? Haley nodded. They told you to wait because they didn't want you rushing in and getting hurt, she said. There's nothing magical about your wedding day that'll suddenly make it the right choice if it wasn't before. And if it's the right choice now, then why wait? Ava was nodding along, but she frowned. How do I know when it's right? She asked. Well, Haley paused to think about it. Okay, now here's something I wish my parents had told me, okay? Okay. Sex is nice, she paused and corrected herself. No, it's great even, but everyone seems to get this idea that it's this precious, special thing, and they say all kinds of stupid stuff about it. Judging you for having too little, too much, being a virgin, not being a virgin. So, I shouldn't care? Ava asked. Exactly. Just be smart about it. Have as much or as little as you want. And don't let anybody tell you when or with who or anything like that. It's all your choice and nobody else's. Just be smart about it. Smart? Well, I mean, you know about the pill and condoms and everything, right? Oh, that, Ava looked relieved. Yes, I know about that stuff. Good. So be smart about using them because, trust me on this, you really don't want to be a mum yet. No, Ava agreed. Okay. So the question isn't how do you know when it's the right time, okay? The question is just, do you want to? There was a long pause, during which Ava drank about a third of her Ovaltine. Adam's going away, she said, eventually and quietly. Haley shuffled around the corner and put an arm around Ava, rubbing her back. He is? Ava nodded. He turned 17 a few days before Christmas, and he's joining the military. Oh, honey. No, I'm happy. I'm going to be doing something too. We both want to achieve something, and this is the way he's going to do it. She sounded like she meant it. But he's going to be gone for so long, and you feel like you should give him a proper send-off. Ava nodded. For me, that wouldn't be the right reason, sweetie. Ava wrapped both of her hands around her Ovaltine and sipped it. In that case, what would be the right reason, she asked. There's only one right reason, honey, because you both want to. The list starts and ends there. They sat in silence for a bit until Ava finished her drink. I'm leaving too, Haley revealed. You are? Ava looked up and Haley internally winced at the desperation she saw in the young girl's eyes. Haley, why? Don't worry. It's not because of Sarah or anything. I'll be coming back, she promised. I'm just going away for a few months. Why? Mark and I are having another baby. She dug the pregnancy test box out from where she'd hidden it under the throw pillow. We're worried about the low gravity affecting the baby's development, so I'm going back to Earth for a year. You're the first person I've told besides him." "Oh, wow!" "I think I conceived a day or two before we lost Sarah. I know Mark and I we've not been together since then." "You've not?" Haley nodded. "I'm not ready," she said, "and I'm so scared I'll treat the new child like a replacement for Sarah, but here we are. So I'm going back to work with the Earth end of the reclamation project, and Mark's staying here." It was Ava's turn to put a hand on Haley's arm. "Are you two—" "We're—" Haley squeezed back some of the impending tears with a forced smile. "We're fine, really. He gets angry sometimes. I've said some things that we scare Jack sometimes. But we always cuddle and talk about it afterwards. In a way, I'm glad the baby's come along. It'll give us both something to work on for the future. Maybe that and a little distance will help." She wiped her eyes. "Come on. You came here for advice. Did I help?" Ava nodded. "You helped a lot," she promised. I have one question left, really." "Sure." "How will I know if Adam wants to?" Haley giggled. "Honey, with boys, it's so easy to tell." "Be serious," Ava protested. "I was," Haley assured her. "But the simplest way is just to ask him. Failing that, if you want to be sure, well, if you make it obvious that you want him, then you'll know soon enough either way." "So, how do I make it obvious?" Haley laughed. "Go into his room wearing some perfume and one of his t-shirts and nothing else. Kiss him, then grab his wrist and put his hand on your butt," she said. "He'd have to be dead not to get that message." "But what if—" Haley interrupted her patiently. "Ava, sweetie, everything after that point is for you and him, okay? There's no script. Just talk to one another. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what you want to do. Tell him what you want him to do. Ask him what he wants. That's the most important thing, okay? Communication." "That sounds awkward," Ava was blushing. "It will be. Forget what it's like in the movies. Sex is always at least a little bit awkward. Your first time most of all. Just live with that and try to have fun." "Thanks, Haley." "No, thank you. It's good to—" She'd been about to say something about falling back into that mother role, but decided against it. "To be able to give advice," she finished. Ava smiled and gave her a little hug. She left the house looking much more relaxed than she'd entered it. For her part, Haley was surprised to find there was a little warm coal of happiness deep inside her again. As soon as Ava was out of the way, she sat down and wept happily. Owen Powell. "So, what am I going to be doing?" Adam was asking, as Powell entered the gym. Legsy hadn't, as predicted, been happy about giving Adam a taster, but the young man was persuasive and knew his mind. The sergeant just picked up the rucksack that had been leaning up against the wall behind him, hoisting it easily in one hand. "You're going to run around the gym wearing this," he said. "Okay." Adam turned around. "How heavy is—" "Oof!" "Do up that one around your waist and that one across your chest. Pull 'em tight. No tighter than that. Come on. There you are," Legsy instructed, until the pack was strapped tight to Adam's body. He gave it an experimental shake, yanking the teenager around. "Good." Adam nodded, though his expression had an edge of trepidation to it. "Good." "Well, what are you waiting for then?" Legsy demanded. Adam made an "oh, right" face and set off at a jog. "Is that what you call running?" Legsy shouted after him. "Come on! You're here to train, boyo!" Adam nodded and gained some speed. "Your crippled old man runs faster than that! Come on!" Legsy spurred him. Powell ambled across the gym as the kid found his third gear and started to actually run around the gym. "That bag won't get lighter if you slow down, pal," Legsy called, then noticed his commanding officer and stood to attention. "Captain!" "Not a bad start," Powell observed, waving at him to stand easy. Adam was in athletic shape, at least. He wasn't a fast runner and probably never would be, but after a little encouragement, he was doing a pace that should at least spare him the indignity of being the slowest trainee when he got to basic. "Don't let him hear you say that, sir," Legsy admonished him, then raised his voice again. "You'll have to bloody shave by the time you're done at this rate. Come on!"
"How heavy is that bag anyway?"
15 kilos, Legsy said.
"You're starting the kid out on tab weight."
"If he's going for PJ, sir. Faster, boyo, come on!" "Then fuck I'll be starting him there," Legsy told him. "Besides, he's stronger than he looks." Powell watched Adam piston along, already drenched in sweat and red as a forge.
"You know training better than me," he conceded.
He lurked against the wall and watched as Legsy cajoled, spurred, and berated Adam into keeping up the pace, verbally goading the boy to keep him putting one foot in front of the other, clicking the little counter in his hand every time Adam made it past the start line. It wasn't long before the exertion began to really catch up, though. Adam's steps became wobbly, his rhythm faltered. He was practically on the edge of falling over when he passed the start line again, and Legsy finally blew his whistle. They let him rest and had a quick conversation.
"Well?"
Powell asked. "Look at this," Legsy showed him the counter. Powell arched an eyebrow at the number on it.
"Really?"
"Stronger than he looks, like I said, and he's got more in him, too. Reckon he could stand up and do maybe half as many again."
"You're sure?"
"Fuck I," Legsy agreed, "especially if we can find his Superman button."
"His...
Powell rubbed his chin.
Mind if I..."
"Be my guest." They knocked fists together, and Powell took his time ambling over to where Adam was still lying, spread-eagled on the heavy pack.
"Enjoying a nap?"
Adam's breathing was much improved even by the time Powell reached him, though the lad was clearly in a lot of discomfort as he tried to raise his head. "How did I do?" he asked.
"Do? You're not done yet, mate."
"You're kidding!"
"Nope."
"But... how? Everything hurts."
"Is that right? Fine. That's not to be worried about," Powell reassured him. "You can lie there a bit longer, but while you're at it, I want you to imagine the future."
"Okay."
"Imagine Adam Aries, 70 years from now, dying peacefully in hospital, surrounded by his beautiful wife, and beautiful kids, and beautiful grandkids. Idyllic, right? A warm hand in his, and his family all about him. He closes his eyes and slips away, and there they are."
Adam just gaped at him, confused.
"The ghosts," Powell clarified. "The ghosts of all the people he could have saved, but didn't because everything hurt 70 years earlier. Every life lost because young Adam Aries didn't have it in him to push on through the pain. Every soul he has to look in the eye and know that their lives mattered less to him than a little fucking comfort."
Adam's breathing slowed hugely as he sat there for a second with his mouth open. Then, without a word, he rolled over, hauled himself to his feet, and began to run. Date point: 4 years, 11 months, 1 week, AV. Folk the Colony, Cimbrean. The Far Reaches. Adam Aries.
"Happy birthday!"
The now familiar soreness and weakness in Adam's legs were promptly forgotten when he found Ava and his dad waiting for him in the front room, and a wrapped present and some cards on the table. Not to mention the cake.
17 years,
Gabriel said, hauling himself upright and giving Adam a heartfelt hug.
"It's been a wild ride, amigo."
"Así es la vida," Adam returned the hug. "I thought you were back on Earth for the Lehman case."
"And miss this? I'd have beaten them out of the way with my cane if they tried to make me stay," Gabriel scoffed.
"Gracias." Adam meant it too. He sat down next to Ava, who kissed him lightly on the cheek. "Presents? I'm not used to birthday presents." "You're not?" Ava asked. "Well, Christmas is in 3 days. I usually just get a big Christmas present, you know?"
"Well, what do you get the man who's leaving everything behind?" Gabriel asked.
"Good question," Adam said, eyeing the gifts. Gabriel just grinned and lit the candles. 2 large numbers rather than a field of 17 small ones.
"Blow them out and you'll see," he promised.
Adam dutifully did so, and Ava slid the gifts in front of him as Gabriel set about cutting the cake. "That one's from the school," she said as Adam selected it. He fingered the odd, lumpy package for a second, then gave up on identification and ripped it open. "Sandals? And a toiletries bag?" He opened it and peered inside, finding an assortment of hygiene products and some deodorant. "They did some research, and apparently you'll need all of those in training," Ava explained. "Huh, thoughtful of them." Adam set them aside, pleased with the gift. Ava gave him an embarrassed smile when he opened her gift. "You're allowed so little, and, the school had already got you everything, so I, kind of donated to charity in your name," she confessed. "I'm sorry." "Water aid?" Adam read the card. "Yeah, they said the amount I gave should save a few lives," she smiled nervously. Adam kissed her. "Good gift," he reassured her, then selected the card from Gabriel. A photograph fell out of it when he opened it. When he picked it up, his mouth opened slightly. "How did you—"
"Facebook," Gabriel said. "Kind of a reminder of more innocent days."
Adam nodded, realizing that it was the first time he'd seen his own mother's face in months. Luisa Aries ni Ortega hadn't been an easy woman to get along with. In fact, some days she'd been the bane of his life. But the photograph really was a happy one, showing off an all-too-rare smile that had made it very obvious why Gabriel had ever fallen in love with her, and it reminded Adam for just a second that he really did miss her. He wasn't sure just how long he studied the print before he set it down. It was probably only seconds. It felt like weeks. He reached over and hugged Gabriel. "I love you, Dad."
"I love you too, man," Gabriel said.
Date point: Christmas Day. 4 years, 11 months, 2 weeks, AV. Folk the Colony, Cimbrean. The Far Reaches. Ava Rios. Christmas on Cimbrean seemed set to become something a little different to the small family affair that Ava had been used to on Earth. Given that Christians were decidedly in the minority amongst the citizenry of Folktha, it was hardly surprising that there was a noticeable shortage of nativities and hymns, too. None of the small congregation at that morning's non-denominational Mass had apparently minded. In fact, the sermon had stressed Matthew 6:5 and its implications for a Christian abroad in a predominantly secular galaxy. Not that you should keep your faith to yourself as such, so much as that your faith was yours, your own little candle to carry, giving you light and warmth, but also representing a burden of care, not to let it die and not to burn down your relationships with. That relaxed approach didn't exactly gel with what Ava had learned in Sunday school. The ideas of hell and salvation had always scared her, while insofar as Christianity, as it was practiced in Folktha, could be called a sect, their sect's focus on personal fulfillment in this life through a loving relationship with God, rather than expectation of reward or a stay of punishment in the next through a regime of worship, spoke to her. The consensus at discussion over coffee that had followed had broadly been that, in fact, a Christian on Cimbrean was free to have a much more personal relationship with God precisely for those reasons. Most of them confessed to feeling more spiritually fulfilled than they had ever been on Earth. A few expressed doubts about reinventing Christianity, but even those voices were simply voices of caution rather than rejection. The hymns made her feel warm inside, as did Reverend Joanne White's hand on the top of Ava's head during the blessing. It was like stepping into another world when they left the Faith Center to join in the secular festival outside. The size of the cargo jump array had limited the size of the tree they could import, but it still formed a towering centerpiece to the town park, decked in lights and ornaments fashioned from spaceship wreckage or from the by now thoroughly extinct pinkwood tree. There was no snow, of course. In fact, it was a warm Cimbrean summer's day, hence the adoption of a number of Australian Christmas traditions, including bikinis, barbecues, and Bacardi. A dozen engineers from the Byron Motor Pool, a motley bunch who had taken the name The Alleged Orchestra for their performance, were set up and vigorously arranging every seasonal tune they could think of on the fly, beating the music into shape until it vaguely fit their unique instrumentation, which included a diddly bow, a metallophone made from a set of wrenches, and a cello that had been recycled out of a couple of beer kegs. The result was amazingly musical, with a bluesy, jazzy, energetically raw twist that seemed to be going down well with the revelers. The Gowans were watching it all with plain and obvious bemusement, she noticed. There were a lot of them now, all males, and all seriously throwing themselves into the practice of meditation with the vigor of a man helping his child build sandcastles who'd suddenly uncovered a pirate's chest. They were sipping mulled wine and probably enjoying themselves, though they were keeping out of the way. There was so much to take in, none of it guided by any specific tradition, but informed by hundreds. People were bringing out their presents to put them in little piles under the tree, the smells of the town feast being prepared, spices and dancing, and an impromptu a cappella rendition of Fairy Tale of New York, Sir Jeremy Sandy in a Santa outfit, the soldiers versus civilians tug-of-war. Haley and Mark sitting in a corner, his arms around her waist from behind, watching their son, Sarah's little brother Jack, play with his classmates with strange expressions that were equal parts happiness and sadness. There was a sudden pair of arms around her own waist. "Can I interrupt?" Adam asked her. Ava glanced down at the camera. She hadn't been entirely conscious of taking the pictures. "Sorry." "Don't be." He took her hand and led her back towards the alleged orchestra, where people were whirling and skipping in circles to the music, linking arms, bouncing around one another, and then spinning off to join up with a new partner. She couldn't keep up with him. Over the last month he'd gone from quite athletic to military fit under Legsy's watchful guidance, but she didn't quit the dance when she couldn't go on any longer. She just deorbited to its outskirts to clap along and cheer and whoop as he enjoyed himself, occasionally letting herself take a picture. It was just the start of a day that lasted forever. Date point: Boxing Day. 4 years, 11 months, 2 weeks, AV. Adam Aries. Adam wasn't asleep yet, but it still took him a couple of seconds to register the knock on his door. He sat up a bit. "Ava?" She called through the door. "Can I come in?" "Sure." She left the hall light on and leaned against the doorframe, backlit by it, and Adam had to employ some willpower not to stare. She was wearing what looked a lot like one of his t-shirts, a thin white one. The shirt wasn't blocking any of the light from behind her, and the varying depth of shadow her body made under it was... He sat up some more and leaned forward to try and hide what the view did to him, discreetly bunching a little more blanket on his lap. There wasn't anywhere else to look, though, without actually looking away from her. If he looked down, then he had to contend with her legs. And as for her face, there was an expression there that he couldn't really read. A dark and intense one. "Hey, he said. "You okay?" "It's after midnight," she said. "Oh, happy birthday." She looked like she was about to say something. Then she shook her head, stepped into the bed, and hugged him. "Can I sleep here tonight?" she asked. He scooted over and she dug herself under the blankets and wriggled into his chest. He smoothed her hair out of the way. "You okay?" She looked up and kissed him. "It's going to be tough not having you around." He put a hand on the back of her head and held her. "That's going to be the toughest bit," he agreed. "You'll write me?" "Every chance I get." She puffed out a rush of air into his chest and snuggled up against him even closer. "I love you." It was a phrase they rarely uttered. A vulnerable, weak phrase, really. But that just meant it had so much more meaning for them. "And I love you," he promised. He could feel her smile against his chest, and the way she relaxed, and fell asleep. She was still there in the morning when he woke up. Date point: 4 years, 11 months, 4 weeks, AV. Seattle, Washington, USA, Earth. Adam Aries. Leaving home had been hard. Traveling alone and sleeping alone in an unfamiliar hotel room in an unfamiliar city full of the kind of traffic that reminded him painfully of San Diego and which he had grown accustomed to the absence of in Folktha hadn't made for a good night's sleep. That, and it was cold. January in Seattle versus early summer in Folkville had been an unwelcome introduction to the joys of a freezing gray drizzle that seemed to come right off Puget Sound, bent on freezing the whole city. He'd been tempted to dive for the warmth of his hotel room the second he got off the plane, but instead he used the hours of daylight and went straight from the airport to the USAF recruiting office. That part turned out to be easy. He was in and out inside of an hour, having practically had some documents thrust into his hands along with instructions to attend the military entrance processing station the next morning. Apparently, the recruiter had been impressed. For lack of anything better to do, he took a walk and saw the sights. He'd have preferred to jog, but he'd worn his good chinos to make an impression for the recruiter. He didn't watch the people at first. He watched the architecture and the city, taking in the square, glassy grayness and the scratchy trees that were no more than bare twigs in the winter, the overcast sky, openness of the street plan, and the whir of bicycles. The traffic was familiar, but the city it crawled around in couldn't have been more different. Cold though it was, he could see that the plants which seemed to be all over everything would actually fit here, rather than being aliens imported and maintained at great effort. Of course, Seattle meant Starbucks. He knew that much, and eventually he dropped in on the one on Fifth Avenue, in the shadow of the monolithic black Columbia Center. Mercifully, it was quite warm inside, and he shucked off his jacket, the rugged all-weather one that most Cimbrean colonists had, with "From the Ashes" patch that only Ava shared. He tugged at the t-shirt he was wearing underneath, aware that it was an old one that nowadays was stretched tight across his chest and shoulders. It was a good shirt for showing off the gym-fit physique he'd been picking up training with Legsy, but not exactly comfortable. The people-watching skills that Gabriel had taught him prodded him a second or so later, alerting him to a change. It was subtle. The young mother in line in front of him had shepherded her kids forward and was now keeping them in front of the stroller. The older man in the gray suit next to him scooted his chair forward and around the table a little. The barista, on the other hand, was almost certainly sneaking sly glances at him down the counter. He tried to ignore it, studying the menu as they crawled towards the counter, but it was difficult to ignore that the people who joined the line behind him left arm's length at least, nor the snippet of conversation he could just hear from a middle-aged couple by the door. "No, I don't think so. He doesn't have any tattoos." That shocked him, upset and surprised him. He fumbled his way through a clumsy order for a simple latte, left the change for a tip, and made himself scarce. His return walk to the hotel was a solemn and thoughtful one, which he spent, rather than looking up at the buildings, looking down at his feet, lost in thought and trying to ignore the way people veered out of his path on the sidewalk. In the end, he spent the evening lurking in his hotel room, playing free games on his phone. The weather, if anything, got even more dismal overnight, which was in its own way fortunate because he barely slept, and an early morning jog in the bracing Washington weather did more to get him alert and ready than all the coffee in Columbia. Once wearing clean and dry clothes, he caught a cab to the MEPS, which turned out to be just one small part of a huge building behind a wall of hedging and trees, by the railroad track and just north of the airport. It wasn't what he'd pictured, but he trusted the cab driver, so he refused to allow himself to dither outside. He headed straight in after paying the fare. Inside, it wasn't what he anticipated either. He'd envisioned more of the posters and macho imagery that had decorated the recruiting office. What he instead got was a reception desk in a fairly bland office space. There were flags and crests up and a general clean and efficient air. But if not for the uniforms, he might have been in a civilian workplace. The reception desk didn't actually have a human on it, just a series of touchscreens which, on being prodded, walked him through a quick and simple series of questions about who he was and what he planned on becoming, asked him to scan the barcode on the form the recruiter had given him, and then directed him to a printer which spat out a sticker with a QR code with his name on it, thanked him, and directed him to wait. There were a lot of chairs for that. Adam paced, pausing to grab meager cups of water from the cooler in the corner. He'd barely been there for 5 minutes before he started to feel like a zoo lion. He might have been there half a day before anything interesting started to happen. A handful of people were sitting and fidgeting alongside him, most about his age and with their parents in tow, before he was called and directed to a station where he filled in a form. Then he went back and waited. Then he was called to another station, where they asked him some questions. Then he went back and waited, again and again. By the time it was done, he felt both as if he'd never stopped moving and also as if nothing at all had happened. He had no idea if it was afternoon or full evening yet, but eventually he was sat down opposite a handsome man in a blue shirt with the 5 stripes of a technical sergeant on his sleeve and the surname Foster on his chest, and his hand shaken. "So, you want to become a pararescueman?" the sergeant asked, sitting down. "I do," Adam agreed. "Why?" "The unit motto speaks to me, that others may live." When Foster just waited patiently, he felt drawn to elaborate. I'm from San Diego. I've lost people, and I guess I want to keep others from having to experience that." "Have you considered alternatives?" "Sure, but this is my first choice," Adam said. "What alternatives did you consider?" "I guess security, force protection, medic, that kind of thing, you know? I was thinking of being a cop like my dad before I decided to do this." "Was there a specific event that changed your mind there?" Adam nodded. "My friend was murdered, Sarah Tisdale, on Cimbrean. I heard it was a big story back here on Earth for a while." Foster nodded. "You have my condolences," he said. "But why did that change your mind about your choice of career?" Adam took a deep breath, worried that what he was about to say might sound paranoid or crazy and ruin his chances then and there. But Powell's advice had been impossible to misinterpret. Speak honestly. Always. I think there's a pattern at work here," he said. "Like, everyone knows that San Diego was destroyed by antimatter. It was in the official investigation report. But nobody has that much antimatter on Earth. So there have to have been aliens involved, somehow. And who else would want to sabotage Folk's spaceport like the guy who shot Sarah was trying to? Well, I think the military knows who's behind it, and I want in. I want to stop them from hurting anybody else." Foster stood up. "Stand up. Let me have a look at you." Adam did so. "Look at me," Foster continued. "Raise your arms above your head." Adam did so, patiently waiting an explanation. He didn't get one. Foster just gestured to a pull-up bar. "See that? Get up on it and show me what you've got." Adam almost laughed. He'd been doing reps alongside Legsy in 1.15G in Folk's variable gravity gym for the last month. He shook his limbs loose, reached up, got his form strictly correct, and set to. He hadn't even started to feel the burn yet when Foster interrupted him. Okay, get off that thing. Put this on and start over." This turned out to be a heavy-weighted vest. Adam shrugged it on, got back on the bar, and resumed his pull-ups. He was finally starting to feel some heat in his muscles when Foster spoke to him. "So why you?" Adam dropped off the bar and turned to face him. Foster shook his head. "I didn't tell you to stop, son," he chided. "Get back up there and keep going." "Sorry." Foster watched him resume his form. "So why you?" he asked. "What do you mean?" Adam asked him. "It's a simple question, son. Why you? Why do you think you want this? Why do you think pararescue is the right one for you?" "Well, like I said, the motto." "Okay, well, what makes you think you're right for pararescue?" Adam's brow creased as he really started to feel his muscles working. The weighted vest was making all the difference. "I'm going to work damn hard for this," he said. "If I have to stay on this," he grunted, "bar till I'm 20 to prove it, I damn well will." "You think you can work that hard?" "I know." The exertion finally started to choke off Adam's words. "Yeah, I can," he finished between pulls. Foster nodded again, watched him for a few more before finally raising a hand. "All right, rest up." Adam lowered himself slowly down this time and massaged his hands. Foster handed him a glass of cold water as he sat down, which Adam gulped down in one as the sergeant jotted down a few short observations. "All right, I think I'm done with you for now," Foster said. "You'll need to go on through the rest of the MEPs, get your tests done, and all that stuff. But assuming there's no problems here, you'll be coming back here tomorrow to speak with the Special Forces recruiter." Adam beamed. "Thank you," he said. "How'd you get here? Cab? Where are you staying?" Adam told him, and Foster nodded. "Right, we'll pick up the bill from here on in, as well as transport. I'll see you later on today once you're done with all the tests. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Adam, who was measured, weighed, had samples of blood, hair, and saliva taken, asked to walk around with one foot on tiptoe, had puffs of air shot into his eyes by a machine, spent some minutes with another machine pressing a button whenever he saw lights in his peripheral vision, a few minutes in a dental chair, filled in forms, answered questions, took tests. Even the business-like intimacy of the full medical examination didn't faze him. The important part was, he was past the first hurdle. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been part 1 of Chapter 22. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you enjoyed it, please consider dropping a like and subscribe, maybe dropping a comment down below. And if you're interested, please go ahead and check us out on Patreon. The link is in the video's description and at the top of the page. Lots of cool stuff going on over there. As always, a huge shout out to my buddy Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could never do this without you. Okay, and so it begins, the long march through Chapter 22, Warhorse. If I know right, this chapter is physically larger, as far as page count, than the entire rest of the story prior to it. Fortunately, this is the only chapter that's like this, good God. But yeah, this chapter is going to take the better part of 6 or 8 months to go through at a rate of 1 episode per week, assuming that, life doesn't happen and I get called out of town for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. Who knows? I hope not. Unfortunately, my work tends to do that to me from time to time, and it gets really annoying, but you got to pay the rent. So stick with me and we'll get through this. Okay, so question for the day. Who is your favorite singer? Leave your answers in the comments down below. In the meantime, until next time, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye.